I didn't add like an 8th day of the work week, but I'm bending time like Hermione Granger. I'm like somehow reading people at the same time. And
I believe that you could, Jimmy.
I bet you could.
There's nothing that we can't do with our crystals. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another week of Stage Door Medium. I'm your host, Jimmy. It's nice to see you again. If you are new to the podcast, essentially about a year ago, which is crazy to think that this journey started in December, we're going on a year. I've been a practicing medium for about the last 10 years. So I've been reading Broadway clients for a while. I kind of got the idea to marry the two and have some of the folks that I'd read come back on a podcast where we could sit down and explore the parallels between energy and artistry. And then it kind of snowballed into something I hadn't anticipated, where now I get to meet so many beautiful new humans all the time with readings for folks that want to come on the podcast. So thank you for joining us. Before I introduce our guests, yes, there's an S today. This is our first duo pair that I'm interviewing. One question that came in: have you, meaning me, ever been unable have I ever been unable to read a client? So yeah, it's happened twice. The first time it was me, it was my fault. I don't want to say fault, but it was my issue. The second time it was a client. So I'll kind of explain. But here's the thing, because the second part of the question had mentioned that they had been told by mediums that they're impossible to read. So to answer that, I don't know if I believe in that. I think we all have our own energetic thumbprint or like face ID, but I think when we go to a medium, your average medium should be able to sit with your energy and pull on some things. I think sometimes what happens is that if you have like a client who just wants to be a jerk, that energy might throw off the mediums and they might get nervous. So the medium might start to wall themselves up. Me, I think being a teacher, like I will call you out on your shit so fast if you try pulling that with me. So I will tell you, hey, do you want a refund or do you want me to gift this time to somebody else because you're wasting yours? So I've never had an issue except twice. So the first time was when I was going through a particularly difficult time in my life. I sat there with a client, and if you're listening to this, you probably like theater, and it was like the moment where Bernadette Peters' wand breaks and into the woods, and she's trying to, or before it breaks, and she's trying to do it and nothing's coming out. And I was sitting there and like nothing was making sense with the client. And I know that they weren't trying to, fool me or anything like this. I just felt like completely unplugged from the wall. So I had called my mentor and I'm like, what happened here? And she knew what I had been going through. And she was like, you're not meant to be reading right now. She's like, you have to grieve. Like you have to be human and focus on your own stuff right now. So it took me, I would say, about a couple months until I was able to start working with clients again. But that was scary. The first time going back with a new client, I'm like, is it on today? Like, are we here? And I had some signs that I knew that it was back. But other than that, the other time that I had a difficult, experience was somebody had roommates and they all were home. And all of the doors were open. So she had 4 other roommates, and that was tricky because I was getting details for everyone. It is, as much as we'd like to think it's just for the person that I can see on the Zoom call, spirit doesn't work that way. If your roommates, dad wants to come through and thinks it's an opportunity to sneak in and infiltrate, they sometimes will. So it can make for a confusing experience. So those are the only 2 that I've had. And to go back to that last part again, no, I don't think that there are people that just can't be read. I think it is interesting. Certain mediums can't read other mediums. That I've heard is more common because we start to like vibrate up here, and that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, so that's that. So I'm really excited today. Our guests are so special. Before I introduce them, really fun story. They were two incredible Broadway performers. So, oh gosh, there's a ton of credits that I feel like would take the whole podcast episode to go through. But um, they are known as the Broadway Husbands. They have, gosh, they're influencers. They have their own podcast. They're Disney lovers, which makes me love them even harder. So please help me welcome Bret Shuford and Stephen Hanna to our show today. Yay.
Hi,
Hi.
Jimmy.
Hi,
How
thanks for
are
having
you?
us.
Thank you for coming.
Good.
You guys are doing well. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're good. Yeah, we're very good.
How are things in Texas?
Good. We just survived a hurricane,
Yeah,
and
confusing but good.
politically
It's
it's
confusing.
challenging, but it's
Sure.
and it makes it very hard. It's challenging. It's challenging to be around when all this disinformation, and then also the governor. But I feel like we're hopefully part of helping change some of what the pattern of what's happening in the state. So
Yeah, and beyond that, it's beautiful here, and that's kind of why we're here because we like being here. We have, wide open spaces, and we are close to family here, so there are great benefits of being
Yeah.
here.
Did both, and I don't remember, did both of your families grow up in Texas then?
No, just me, Brett. I grew up here. Steven's from Pittsburgh.
I'm from Pittsburgh,
So dance
and I think
moms.
every time yes, that's right, Abby Lee Miller.
Every ALDC.
I didn't go there. Yes, the ALDC. That is right. But every time we've come here, I've always been like, oh, I like
It's true,
Texas.
yeah, because
I
the
like
weather's
it. Yeah, the
nice,
weather's
and
nice, and there's space. I think it's the opposite of New York, right? There's lots of sun, lots of space, and lots of grass.
and it's affordable.
I know. I have family in Kentucky, and I remember visiting them, like what homes were going for here, and you got so little. You had these gorgeous, like brand new builds that were like a fraction of that. And
It's kind of amazing.
so had you already been split between Texas and New York pre-shutdown, or were you just like, nope, we're going here?
No, it all happened it's one of those, we kind of just let God kind of take us wherever we needed to go, and we were really taken care of during the pandemic. We by chance,
Somebody bought our apartment in the
bought our
city,
Manhattan apartment.
and so we sold it. And then while we were there selling our apartment, I got a temporary job offer outside of Houston. And I said no, I think twice. And then I said yes. And we decided to come down because we wanted to spend time with his family at some point during the pandemic anyway. So we thought it was like a good chance for that to happen
For a few months.
It was only supposed to be from August through December of last year of 2020. And we got here, and everything was just going really smoothly. And so then I was asked to stay through June, and I decided to stay on. And then we started looking at houses in January of this year. And then once we started doing that, it was kind of like, okay, I guess we could stay here for a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know, it's interesting. There were some ideas, like my husband and I had talked about. It's interesting the things that came up during the pandemic, just in like, what do we want out of life? And then how, I know we're still in the midst of a pandemic, but with returning to normal life, though, for the most part, the ideas that are still there. And I'm like, oh, this wasn't a fad. Like we had always, whenever we went on vacations, it was always go, go, go. It was always bigger cities. And it wasn't until the pandemic that I started going up to like the Catskills and doing like Woodstock and this area and like Hudson. And I'm like, I don't know about you, but I'm like, I kind of want to get like a place out here where, in the summer we could live there because he can work from wherever. I'm like, and I don't know. And so it's funny, like that idea has not gone away since the pandemic is starting to, stabilize, I should say. So we'll see what takes us there. But
yeah, I think for us, we'd always dreamed about suburbia, but then the reality of suburbia always kind of felt not right. And then the pandemic hit, and it just sort of happened, and here we are living in the suburbs of Houston. So it just never would have, if you had asked us a year and a half ago, where we would be, this is not anything that would have been on our radar, but we're super blessed.
There's also suburb shaming that I feel like happens because we live in a suburb. So we have Buffalo, and then, I mean, literally there's a street called Kenmore Ave, and you cross it and you're in this village of Kenmore. And we wanted a space, like we were like, what we were paying was murder for like a 1 bedroom in Buffalo. And then I was like, this is stupid. I'm like, this is why people can't afford homes, because they're like just shelling all their money out for monthly rent. So we wanted a space for the dogs. But anyway, there's so much people were giving us like, ew, you moved to the burbs or you sold out. I'm like, I guess if that's what you define selling out, like, sure, we straight up sold out. So
Yes.
how did you guys meet? Because I do not know this.
Well, sometimes we give like the sort of bread and butter answer, but we'll give
you the real
since you did our
answer.
spiritual reading and you've met our ancestors. We met actually in recovery. We both are sober.
Yeah.
And so we met through 12-step meetings, and
then so we saw each other around, right? And then the first time we really like saw each other and really have a really good memory of like us kind of being like
Flirting.
hooked into each other was like I was invited to his Christmas party in 2006. Oh my God. Yeah, it was 2006. And
Stephen was dancing in New York City Ballet at the time. And I'd been to see New York City Ballet 0 times in my life. So I didn't know like what he, I was like, oh, he's a ballet dancer.
So,
and my friend was like, he's a principal dancer in New York City Ballet. He's a big deal. And I was like, okay. But I just thought he was hot. And then,
so I was at his Christmas party. We stared at each other like intensely.
It was like an intense Christmas Eve.
The entire party. But at the time I was in a terrible relationship still.
Me too.
And he was too. And so we were respectful of that. And we just became friends, mostly because we were both sober. And so it was kind of, built around that in the beginning. And then at some point I was out of my relationship, and then he was finally out of his relationship, and it was boom. And then we've been together ever since, really is.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Having done both Broadway and ballet, is there a community that felt more like home to you?
It's interesting. I think at the time, they both felt like home for various reasons at the time. I think the ballet world, for as harsh and as cold as it can be at times, I think that, it was so supportive of me as a human, as like I grew up in it.
Yeah, a lot of history there.
A lot of history there. They took care of me when I needed help.
Sure.
And they gave me the career that I had. So
he started training at School of American Ballet when he was 12.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know that I ever always felt comforted there, but that might have been my own shit.
And most of the people who go to SAB end up in the company, and so that you just kind of grow up with these people,
Right. So at the time, I don't know that I always felt comforted or taken care of, but I definitely was. And then when I started, the first show that I did was Billy Elliot, and there's a stark difference, right? Because musical theater, obviously acting requires people to talk. So, so people are just in general a little bit louder and have conversations all the time. Not saying that ballet dancers don't, but just, it's in our nature to kind of just be quiet. And, so in Broadway, the Broadway community is just so welcoming and so friendly, and everyone's so grateful to be there for the most part. Everybody wants to do their job. There's not people trying to get out of doing things, right? They're there to do their job. And so, I mean, they're both very welcoming. They both have their great.
It was interesting watching him evolve when he left New York City Ballet and then came into Broadway, and just because I'd been on Broadway for years when we met. And so seeing it from his point of view from the ballet world was very interesting. He's like, everyone's just so excited to be there and works so hard. I was like, yeah, because it's very rare. Like, it's like when you book a show, a Broadway show specifically, you're just like, yes, this is what I've been working for my entire life. and
Yes.
everyone at City Ballet just kind of is you're just always doing it. So it was an
Right.
interesting
Yeah, it's just a different
mindset,
different
you know?
mindset for sure. And also because you're so young when you get into the company that you really just have no perspective, right? So, you know, you just don't
It
have
was
the same
interesting.
perspective. Yeah.
And it's neat, Brett, because I was looking up you were at Beauty and the Beast, like on Broadway. And
Yeah.
I think this is my first Beauty and the Beast cast member. Like I was obsessed with that show.
I have a flashback really quickly of like after we started really dating, and would come to meet him at the stage door, and this friend of ours that we're talking about, she would like pop her head out the stage door and kind of check me out. And
Well, I was literally telling her, and it was John Tartaglia was playing Lumiere at the time, and I was like, "You
they were
guys,
judging me. They were
this
judging me at the
guy
stage door.
is actually dating me, and he's really hot. You got to see him."
That's so sweet, though. Like it's, did you work with Toni Braxton or no? Was she one of your bells?
No, she was before I joined.
Oh,
Yeah, but I saw her.
Was she good?
It was different. She had this rip away yellow, like when she came out for curtain calls, she ripped off the bottom half of the gown and was in a tight yellow mini skirt.
No,
And came
no.
out. Yeah. I'm not even
Tony's
kidding.
also where they got a change in me, right? She requested it.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken.
Right. But she didn't belt it like Ashley Brown did. You know, she
No.
was like a lower key, and it was,
I used to warm up my lower notes when I was doing Smokey Joe's Cafe. Some of the lower notes where I would just like warm up to like Toni Braxton's like "Unbreak My Heart" in the car. I was like, it's ready. I love that. As long as we're on the topic, I guess, of Broadway right now, one thing that I come back to all the time, because I see it with some of the clients that I read, and like my biggest hope is that with Broadway reopening, because it's so exciting, I also hope that performers are going to be kinder to themselves. And I hope this break allows them to go in with a refreshed sense of it's okay. Do you know what I mean? If you didn't book this one, be kind. And can I ask how high is the burnout factor if you're working consistently as an actor? Like, because I think my misconception would probably be that it's not there because you're booking all of these Broadway shows. But others that I've talked to have said, even if you are booking show after show, the burnout factor is so real. Like, could you speak to that?
I mean, the hustle never stops no matter what you're doing, because even when you book, I think there's a misconception that you book a Broadway show and then you're like set. And I think I even thought that. And then you get a Broadway show and you're like, okay, well, what's next? And that show may not run. And then you got to figure out how to stay in shape and be prepared. And even when you're in a show, if like I've been an understudy most of my career, so you're not only doing the show 8 times a week, you're also in rehearsals another 8 to 12 hours a week. And you got to be ready. You got to be prepared and ready to go on. And there's that adrenaline that you have to, and if you're a swing, I mean, swings are the hardest working people on Broadway and do not get enough credit and appreciation. But that the adrenaline and the fear factor and the ability to just pull up and let go of perfectionism and do that job, it can be a burnout. And also I just think a lot of shows are dangerous. Like when you have computers and running things and elevators and things flying in and steel sets and all this stuff, people are risking a lot to tell these stories. And so the adrenaline can be high. And I think so not only that, when you're booking, like you're dealing with all of that workload and that schedule and risk, but then when you're not working, you have to figure out how you're going to pay the bills and how you're going to do it. So you do get burned out, and that's why it's so important to be able to have tools and mindset tools and be able to know that, have creative outlets outside of it. I think a lot of people don't take the time to transfer their hobby, this thing that they enjoyed as a dream that has now become their profession, you got to transfer that creativity into something else, because otherwise your fulfillment kind of lies in your profession. And
Bingo.
so I'm constantly trying to encourage people to like do something else, even if you're just coloring, like just do something outside of the show.
Yeah.
Because you'll feel so much more fulfilled, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, burnout is so real. I mean, I think it's probably real in anything, and especially in Broadway. The schedule alone, like Bret was saying, 8 shows a week. Even, you know, I always get asked the question, like, what's harder, Broadway or ballet, right? And I think that some people think that maybe if your track isn't some physically demanding track in a Broadway show, that, oh, that can't be that hard.
It's a piece of cake.
Yeah, it's a piece of cake 8 times a week. Well, I don't care what part you have. If you're doing it 8 times a week, it's not easy. And just show up every day and do that, and do it well, and get out of the stuff in your head, and be a good person while you're doing it. It's not easy, right? And then, you know, like Bret was saying, you got to find fulfillment. Then there's the hustle bustle of Times Square, right? You're constantly just showing up to work sometimes is exhausting, and then you get there and you're like, oh man, now I gotta do the show. You know, so there's just so many aspects to it. And I think when you do go from show to show to show, right, there's like this true excitement, and there's also a lot of dread. I mean, I found for myself, like, I would get a lot of anxiety over always knowing that I would have to go and perform, and then I wouldn't feel relief until it was over. And so, like, you know, there's just a lot of mindset stuff. Yeah, so burnout is definitely real. And then, you know, then there's also the aspect of not feeling, at least this is a personal thing. I mean, especially in a Broadway show, I always felt like I never had a voice. I mean, I never, my opinion didn't count, you know what I mean? So that's hard. It's hard to be in a place where from the outside it looks like this amazing thing, and for the most part it can be, but there's also something to be said where you go to work and it doesn't really matter what you think. You just have to kind of show up and hit your mark and do exactly what you're told. So it's like this weird dichotomy of things happening.
And on top of that, I think what you were speaking to about the added pressure we put on ourselves, that there's a mindset that's taught to you, no matter, like, right, that
there's never enough.
There's never enough.
So you got to keep searching.
There's like going, a scarcity mindset that I think really is embedded in performers early on. And I think a lot of it really comes from parents and people who don't understand how to help people who want to make a living in the arts know that it's true and it's possible, and believe in themselves enough. But I think there's a lot of people who got burnt and rejected by the industry who now teach it. And so they're teaching a lot of scarcity mindsets to people, that it's hard, and so we're setting up the expectation that you're going to get rejected, or you're going to suffer, and all this stuff. And so we've already bought into it before we even enter the industry.
Yeah, and then like also on like an individual level too, there's this idea of like, now you're in a show, right? And then you're talking to people, and you heard so-and-so got an audition for this, or got an audition for that, or they might be leaving the show. And then so it starts to become like, well, wait a second. All of a sudden, this job that made you feel so worthy, you kind of start to feel like,
and you're told,
wait, I'm still in it, and they're
you're
leaving.
Also told,
you know, it's like
that you can't call out.
Yeah.
You can't miss a show unless you are like your knee is falling off, right? Like you cannot miss a show. And so if you're mentally not in a good place and you're showing up to work, you're going to suffer. It's going to energetically, it's going to transfer backstage. And so it can be a real mind F.
So the short answer is yes. It can be extremely, you can burn out easily, but that's
why it's up to you to take care of yourself.
Yeah, you got to take care of yourself and make yourself happy so that you can just show up and do your best.
I can't speak for all mediums, but I think I will. I think the burnout factor is there, because goodness, when things started blowing up And of course, what a beautiful thing to be able to say when things blew up for me and got really busy. Like, of course, I'm grateful for that. But it started becoming this strange, like, for example, couple months out, like I was booking like a month and a half out, and you're like, oh, this looks, great, obviously, because people are seeing, hey, there's a wait list for this person. So they must be skilled at what they do. And then the wait list started growing. So now it's about 4 months out. And then I started going, well, wait a minute though. Oh gosh, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I don't want to turn them away. I want to help them. So should I start opening my calendar up more? And I tried it at one point, and I was coming home miserable from the readings.
Yeah.
I had added an extra day of the week, extra work. I didn't add like an eighth day of the work week, but I'm bending time like Hermione Granger. I'm like somehow reading people at the same time, and
I believe that you could, Jimmy.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
actually
bet
do.
you could.
there's nothing that we can't do with our crystals. And, so I was coming home miserable, and it's interesting because like it's a selfless job to do it right. And so I think yesterday I had two readings, and then we had Frozen at night, the tours here in town, and I was like, they were my mom joined me, and she's like, how were the readings? And I was like, great. I don't want to talk about it. I'm tired. Like, I just want to go turn this part off. And I think that's the other thing that aids in the burnout, is just talking about it all the time. And I think as a medium, I know what we do is like really special. And there's days where like I'll start to well up going like, I get to do this. Like, and like I don't, it's never lost on me for how special it is. But I'll like obsess on things after I get out of a reading going, I could have done that differently. So where I should be able to turn it off at 45 minutes, like it's like 2 hours and 45 minutes later, something's still sitting funny with me. So you said it best, Brett, like the hobby factor. Like on my iPad's right in front of me. I'll color sometimes, I'll draw. I will even just mess around with like GarageBand, anything to get my creative juices flowing, but not thinking about mediumship. Because it's
Yeah, when I first got sober, I used to go to 12 step, we would go to these 12 step meetings. And if I shared anything, I'd be like, oh my God, about work, like I would say, oh, I'm in a show, or like I just got out of rehearsal or something like that. And I would go to these gay meetings, like primarily gay meetings, and gay meetings in Hell's Kitchen. I learned very quickly, do not say you're in a Broadway show, because as soon as it's over, all the gays were like, what show are you in? Tell me about it. And I'm like, no, I came here for like spiritual healing. I did not come here to talk about work.
yeah, it's so like the same, like people will, they uh, after a while, like sometimes I won't even like I teach as well, and I love being a medium, but there's other times where I'm like, if I had to pick, like if I know somebody's going to want to ask a ton of questions about, well, how does it work? Is it always on, or what number am I thinking of right now? I'm like, I will just go, I'm a teacher. I will, like Stephanie Block was saying in
Yep.
one, she would tell people she was a clown after when she was on Wicked and tour, because she was like, if you said Alphaba, she goes, Wicked was a hot ticket back then. So everyone wanted to talk to the green girl. So
Still is.
she just started saying that she was a clown, a children's clown for birthday parties. And she said the people were like, oh, okay. And they wouldn't talk to her. And so, yeah,
I can totally relate to that
I can
too.
identify
Yeah,
with that,
especially being a ballet dancer, people are like, "What do you do for a living?" And I always like, do I say what I do?" Yeah, like I don't even know if I would lie or if I would just kind of skirt around the answer. But I always hated being like, "I'm a ballet dancer. I dance with New York City Ballet." Oh, here we go. Yeah.
it's like the same questions. I know we get the same too. So how did the Broadway Husbands come about? Like, was this organic? Did it present itself to you?
I'll start.
Okay.
This is adorable.
The first time. Well, because I'll take over. Like, so in the beginning, it was 2013, and we were both unemployed. Is that right? 2013?
Yeah, that was the lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2013 was
A
not a
rough
great
year.
year. And
And
I always think 13, how
yeah,
unlucky that year was.
we were sitting around. It was a Sunday, and we were both unemployed, and we decided to make a YouTube video called 5 Things to Do, or what was it? 5 favorite things to do on a
5 things
Sunday.
to do on a Sunday when you're unemployed.
Yeah. And so like number 1 was like call unemployment, or you know, do your unemployment. And we just made this video. And so that was the beginning of Broadway Husbands. That's how it started, like that idea of like making videos together. And that was like I said, in 2013, but then actually Broadway Husbands, the Instagram account, didn't come about until 2018.
I had kind of gotten really into doing my own YouTube channel and had devoted a year to, I was like, I'm going to make a video a week,
yeah.
a video a week for a year. I had committed to it. Right.
Yeah.
And
one
I
of
did
the
it.
topics
What I tried to do was do a recurring series like every week. So one of them was called Broadway Husbands on my YouTube channel, and it always did better than anything else I posted. And if I started to notice that like things on my own Instagram account would do better when Stephen was included in it, and I was like, So I was like, what if I just create a separate Instagram account? And no one had it, which shocked me, Broadway Husbands. And so we started this separate Instagram account and YouTube channel, and that we actually didn't even start that until 2018.
The Instagram. But we had done YouTube videos.
We had done them on my channel.
Yeah, we were doing YouTube videos for sure.
And so then it just like 2018 we started it, and it just kind of took off, and now we have like 64,000 Instagram followers, and it's become a whole like other side hustle, which we love because we'd never been in a show together. We didn't really ever get to create things together. And I was like, this gives us a chance to actually be artists in a way together, you know? So it's definitely has its, what's that?
What would your main demographic of your followers be? Would it be Broadway performers, gay men?
No, it's primarily gay men. And, you know, we're very family, like, you know, I think that what I noticed a lot on Instagram and kind of the inspiration was I was seeing a lot of couple accounts who were either like interior design and they're like fixing up a home, or they're like super like Balenciaga designer fashion runway kind of thing, or they were over sexualized.
Yes.
And I was like, you know, I don't relate, like we're performers, like our lives are very different. And I just kept thinking, what would like my 13 or 14-year-old self as a young gay kid in Texas who wanted to be on Broadway want to know about living a married life with a man? And so that's kind of was the inspiration. And I feel like we do have a lot of female followers, but it's primarily men. But we're definitely not over sexualized. We really just want to show people that, you know, married life for us is no different than it is for straight couples. And you know, we have the same ambitions. And how do we make a living as freelancers, as artists, in order to support that life? So that's kind of the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, the evolution of it has been huge. And it's interesting because in the beginning it was like, I mean, it felt like something that we had to like really plan. And now, I mean, we still have to really, really plan it because it's a lot of work.
We post every day.
I know.
So it's a lot.
It's a lot of work, but it's definitely become more a part of who we are and less. I mean, I say that, and is that truthful? I mean,
I think it
is. I mean, because we just like, we were doing content before we came to do this interview, and you know, I feel like we're definitely blending more and more in our creativity, whereas
it felt like a chore.
It felt like a huge chore.
Trying to get together like schedules, and especially because when we started it, we were both working and performing, and you know, I would go on tour or he would go do a regional gig, and like, when are we going to make stuff? Because we're not even together, you know.
And you're bringing the job into the relationship. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
and it's not only a job, but it's like something that like we're telling each other, no, you need to do this, no, you need to do that, and it's all up to us.
That's, I mean, literally, I'm so glad we're talking about this. And you bring up the great point about it's to just remind people that we have the same aspirations. Like so many times where where I'll talk about how my husband and I want children one day. They're like, really? I mean, my husband is like a boss of mine, so to speak. Like he does all the graphics, he does all the editing. So there's deadlines that he's like, yo, if you want this video done by Monday, you have to give it to me by like this day. And so it's interesting to like, it never felt like a chore when I started Stage Door Medium, but it definitely was like, I had to remind myself like, oh, like there's an accountability factor. Like I have to turn things into him. And, he, gosh, I'm so, that's the other thing. Like, I think I'm gonna guess with yours too. People don't understand, like for us, it's literally like a 2-person operation. Like I'm doing the readings, I'm setting up all of this stuff, and then he does all the advertising. He does like, and I think sometimes people, if they don't know, they think that you have like a full team or something like that that does, for you guys, can I ask, like, what would best piece of advice you would give yourself if you had to go back and you saw another couple starting something similar?
I don't know. What would you?
If I went back, I mean, my biggest piece of advice for us, even in this moment, is especially because, we're married and we spend a lot of time with each other, and we really, 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 really love each other and like love being with each other. And it's funny because when you talk about accountability, what happens is, we have all of these intentions and plans, and then we both kind of like to procrastinate.
Sure.
And then no one wants to call each other out because we both want to just not do it. And so it just like goes on and on. And so I don't know, I guess my biggest piece of advice, I think, is always just to like kind of get up and take some action and do it, right? Like
the biggest challenge for me is like, I'm definitely more like type A in the relationship, but I never want to be a parent in the relationship. So I will stop myself from actually like just being the captain and just saying like, we're doing this, do this, because I know it's going to turn into a whole like, we gotta have it. So
yeah,
then just nothing gets done.
Wait, I will give an example though. Like of earlier, we had procrastinated a couple days about what we were making before we had this interview, and we made part 1, and the second part had to be in another location. And I'm not saying that you were procrastinating, but you were like, well, let's just do it another time. I'm like, no, we need to do this now. We've waited 2 days. We got to get this at least one thing accomplished. We're going to lose the light. We're going to lose our mojo.
I would actually say like, if you don't know your dynamic in your relationship, like if one person can't be the captain or the other person has resistance or whatever it is, like, because it sounds like you guys have found a really like, your strengths.
Yes.
Like, your husband knows his strengths and your strengths, and you both have made like a very like distinct decision about what those things are. We didn't really do that from the start, and right. I think that's made a real challenge for us. It's like
because our rules are always changing.
Yeah, it's like sometimes I get upset because I'm sometimes being creative director and editing. But then
I'll give my idea and give an exact direction, and then he'll change it and think that he's told me, but has not.
Like, you don't read my mind? Anyway,
I'm not a mind reader.
We're giving you the long answer.
That was one of our conversations earlier. I was like, I'm not a mind reader. You changed your mind and then didn't tell me and then thought I already knew before. Anyways, yes.
That's how it goes.
It's way too similar. Like a couple nights ago, I had a reading here, but then my spouse had to get into the studio to do a quick headshot for somebody. But I was like, the time was like way too close. It was like, I opened the door to start saging out and they were coming in, and I'm like, I got so pissy, and I'm like, no, I'm like, own this. I'm like, I should have said, no, I need 15 more minutes. If that's okay. I know I'm a talker. I know I'm going to go over. Can you? And he would have been fine with it. So I think we do have a really good balance though. I mean, like it's pretty bang on. I think the hardest thing, is, you straddle this interesting line of like, you know what you want your brand to look like. And like in my mind, I'm like, this is how I want a client of mine to feel. This is how I want a viewer of mine to feel. And then what's really neat is that I never want my husband to just feel like he's doing the work of like, I'm always open to like, I'm like, what ideas do you have or what vantage points do you have? Because as a photographer, like he's an artist. And I have to remember that there are moments where like he sees things like I talked about with my sister earlier so differently than I do. And there's moments where like I so appreciate it because he's almost like, you're too close to the topic. Like step back for a second, step back and look at this with me. We just gel so well. Like, especially now we'll be at a party and like before we go in, I'm like 1 hour, right? Like we're leaving after an hour and then we'll go home or I'm like, hey, we had coffee on the way. Let's go get coffee on the way home and just talk about more hopes and dreams and stuff. So what I love so much about the two of you is that you guys are so approachable and you guys are, that's a good word. Spirit just told me, I was like, I can't think of it, accessible. Like there's some that I look at and they're having like Speedo parties in Mykonos as I'm like crying over my Auntie Anne's pretzel. And I'm like, oh, I feel so far away from this lifestyle. And or it's like, hey, I just got actual cheetah print wallpaper for the bathroom. And I'm like, fuck, I still have to spackle something from 3 years ago. And so it's just really beautiful to see to see you guys just so accessible and I don't know. So I guess as we start to wrap up, I read you guys like a month ago.
Oh, maybe.
Was
I guess
really
it has
that
been a
long?
month.
Oh my
yeah.
God, yeah.
Wow.
I think so, because right after it turned into like full-blown sinus infection, and that lasted like 2 weeks. So I think it's a month.
Wow.
So I can't remember. Both of you had never been read before, correct?
Correct.
You know what? That is exactly right. It was 4 weeks to the day. Sorry.
Really?
Yes, go ahead.
Also, you have a really good memory.
You're exact. Yeah.
He does.
Huh.
I don't. Just about certain things.
Dates.
It was Friday. It was a Friday. Yeah.
That's right. Because I remember I had none. No, I did. I had another reading the next day and I woke up like B. Arthur. Like my voice was just so like low. And yeah, I remember I was like, how am I going to do this? Because I had to get up like 3 hours early just to get everything. But anyway, what if there's anything that you feel comfortable sharing about our experience together, anything that either came out reading wise or anything that you want to note, I'd be so grateful.
I mean, everything about it has been so eye-opening. I left that meetings on such a high. I think that's the thing. I think Stephen was, I could tell, kind of scared going into it because he didn't know what to think. I was super excited, but I think we both left the reading very, like, our energy levels had just risen really, really high. We were very excited.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is a lot of stuff you said has been relevant, I guess. Like one of the things you said was like, I was at the moment like having a lot of self-worth issues, and you said like around mid-September you'll come out of it. I feel like this last week has been the most like it's all just like lifted, which is so interesting. Yeah. And then one of the other things I thought was really interesting is there was a ballet dancer, like one of the first spirits that you mentioned.
Yeah, you mentioned
did you find out this?
I mean, so it was funny because I like nixed the first idea that I had because I was like, because you had said the spirit that was coming through was female, a dancer, and young. I think you used the word. He didn't
say young. He said little.
Little. Maybe you used the word little, but in my head, I heard it as young. And
isn't that interesting? Really quick, sometimes people will leave the reading. This is a real phenomenon where they'll leave the reading having heard one thing, and then just recently somebody's like, where's this part of our conversation on the recording? I'm like, I didn't say any of that. Like people hear things differently, but it's that's a whole nother day. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I heard young. So I think that nixed possibility, you know what I mean? And I think we just didn't really explore it.
Well, you were saying like she has dark hair.
She has dark hair, like all
you know.
And
and then you said and something and we were, and Stephen was just like, oh.
And then like I said, our reading was on a Friday. Then we went to my friend's pool on the Monday or Sunday, like right after that, and we were telling them,
a ballet dancer that he grew up with.
Yeah, and my friend Farah, she was like, "Oh my God, wait, isn't Roberto's mother our ballet teacher? His her name was Anna." And I'm like, "Oh my God, right." And as soon as we started talking, I like thought of it.
Bye.
And she loved me, and I spent time with her.
And Farah's like, she loved you, Stephen.
She did, and
I just loved you so much.
But because I heard not what you were saying, do you know what I mean? Like I had a block because I couldn't understand what you were telling me. And so it was fascinating. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you keep going. This is wild.
Yeah. It was a super eye-opening. And this is somebody who I've been very close with. He was my ballet teacher since I've been 9 or 8. And
her son,
his
name is Roberto.
And so is his mother. You know, so, and it's, I have not called him yet. We text a lot. So I haven't had a real conversation where I've been able to actually talk to him about this.
Yeah.
But I need to. Yeah.
There are times like because here's the thing. I always tell the client, I will not placate you. Like if you're like, well, it could be my cousin's blah, 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 I'm going to go like, if it feels wrong in here, like in my gut, I'll go, no. And this woman would not let up for a couple minutes. And I was like, I'm really sorry. I guess we'll move on. But like, she almost seemed like pissed that like she had been there early on in the day. And that's wild.
Yeah.
It's endless. No. We could talk about it for hours.
I think for me too, you know, I'm not going to go into all of the details, but sure. I think one of the craziest things for me, I don't know what the word would be to describe it, is my grandfather came through. Crazy. Yeah. My grandfather came through, and I had learned things about him a year ago. Like I finally understood things that I never understood before because I finally knew the truth. Mm-hmm. And he came through and apologized for, you know, the hurtful things that he had done. Sure. And for me, that was like huge because now that I know the details of certain things that have happened in the past, I, as a human being, like have become clear about why I am the way I am. And so like, that was huge for me. And the fact that you also knew my grandmother's first 2 letters of her name. And we're thinking,
was that the H-I? Was that the H one?
L-I.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's also, her name is, we're trying to have a baby, and we always go back to her name as our daughter's name. So that was just like, I think I cried like instantly as soon as you said it.
The other thing that sort of just as like, in general, I was not close to my grandparents at all. Like they just weren't people I related to. I mean, my dad's parents, which interestingly enough, my dad's parents didn't come through at all, which I thought was fascinating because my mom's parents did, but my dad's parents didn't. And, you know, even my mom's dad, who passed away when I was in high school, he was like one of the first people you mentioned that came through. I never felt close to him. And one of the things you said that stood out for me was how he apologized basically for toxic masculinity, for sort of teasing me because I just wasn't as athletic as my brothers. And when I mentioned that to my family or my mom or even my cousin, ironically, whose dad came through, who had committed suicide, was actually in town the next weekend, which was so weird.
Wow.
I was telling them about the reading, and they were like, you know, I said, my grandfather came through and apologized, and they're like, was he mean to you? Like they couldn't believe that he was mean. And I think that it also just proves to me how embedded that toxic masculinity and accepting that is in our culture, or has been in my family at least. So that was interesting. I kind of took that with me in a way that was like, I didn't need him to apologize to me, but he did. He wanted to. I just was surprised at how much our grandparents came through, because I never really felt like they were a huge presence in my life. And I don't know if you have something to say about that as a medium. Like, why is it that they're the ones that come through when I don't even feel like they're that close to
Wait, and
me?
one more thing. And also then, so obviously I have four grandparents, right? But the three of them I never really knew because they were all gone by the time I was old enough to remember. But the one that I was close with or knew the best, and she actually lived with us, she didn't come through. And I thought that was interesting too.
Really? So, okay. So, couple different things. It's interesting to kind of, I always say there is no, sure, I'm going to try to draw it out right now. There's no way to, for as the medium, to really control
Of course.
how the experience goes. And while I never want to liken it to that of a performance, I always say it's like if you're going to a theater and you're expecting, I don't know, let's say, Bret, you said you've understudied in a lot of shows. We're going expecting to see the full-time person in that track, and you get into the theater and you're like, well, that's not. I wanted this person to go on. I don't know who this insert is, and I always say you're still going to get messages, and you're still going to get things that sometimes you don't even know that you needed. So for me, sometimes it's interesting. Like, I've been to readings where the person that I was like, well, for sure they're going to come through, didn't, but a different family member did because of something that I was going through in my life, that at that moment they felt the most, what's the best word? They felt the most experienced or poised on that topic to speak to, if that makes sense. And
Wow.
and plus, if we have, I'm just going to draw it out. So we got like our grandparents, and like I know I'm just drawing X's right now, but if we've got like, it's hard enough as a medium working with, technically, let's say you've lost no one but grandparents, but they're all gone. To be working with four grandparents alone is very tricky for the medium, because it's, I don't want to say tricky, but that takes enough energy. And if you're listening at home, we had done a group reading, so I read them together. So then you combine another four people, but imagine it as like a tiny elevator. My brain is the elevator. You've now got 8 people in there, plus a dance teacher, plus some other people that came through in the readings. And it's almost like it gets so jam-packed up here that I don't even know if hopefully if you're listening at home, you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? I hope it makes sense, but it's tricky sometimes. The other thing too is I always tell people, go in with no expectations. And because recently I read somebody, and what's the best way to word it? They were expecting an apology or something that was never done to them, though. And after the reading, they're like, well, I didn't get my apology. And I was like, but wait a minute, like, this person seemed really loving and wonderful. And they were like, well, they were. And I'm like, but you weren't wronged by this situation, correct? And they're like, no, not at all. I'm like, okay, so why would they come through to apologize for something that had been done to like somebody that you didn't know as well, when that's not what the point, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I learn on the job too. I sometimes I always say the squeaky wheel gets the grease too. If they really wanted to apologize and address things because they feel like it's going to help you live a more clear here and now, those folks are going to come through. It varies
It's
again.
interesting. So I know you can't guide it, but is there something about our ancestors? Is it just the lineage of our blood and our energy that like that they came through the loudest, or is it that like is there something connected to the family that, because I always just think, I sort of look at energy like an ocean and we're all just like waves on the ocean, right?
But are we like linear?
But are we more connected to certain waves because of our
own
family history?
That's I should have started with that question. It's a really great, I liken it to that of American Horror Story, where every season it's usually the same actors that Ryan Murphy is hiring, but they're different roles to one another. We typically travel within our family units, because what happens is we start to develop a really good rapport with these fellow actors, so to speak. So if, gosh, if, let's say, in 2 lifetimes ago, my mom may have been my sister, they may have been my mentor, because what happens is with any company that you're in, so to speak, the more you work with them, the more you start to know how to push them, whether that's for the better or for the worse, the more. And it makes for a really interesting, because I always say that the main point of coming here is to learn, is to grow, is to learn lessons, is to raise our vibration a little bit more each time that we're here. So if I knew that, the soul of my, let's say, mom was like a real fiery one and a wild card, I'm like, ooh, I know she knows how to push my buttons. Hey, next time we come through, I'm going to contract that you come back as my child. And we might have some rocky relationships because you're still going to know how to piss me off, but it's going to help maximize these couple lessons that I need to learn. So no, you said it really well, Bret. Like, I believe that we're all like little dots that like bees that report back to the big hive. But from there, we kind of stick within our own family of bees, if that makes sense. If you were stuck as a ghost in a theater for all of eternity and you could only watch the same musical over and over and over, what would it be?
Gypsy.
Perfect choice.
Gypsy. Annie?
Character that you've played, or just a character that resonates with you from theater that both of you think would benefit from a medium?
Prince Eric.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe he would have gotten her before Ursula like kind of came in. Maybe if he'd met with a medium before Ursula came back to surface, he would have found out that she just had her voice taken, and he could have just proposed and kissed her, and it would have all been over.
Maybe maybe Sally Bowles.
They're both.
She could have straightened out a lot of things if she talked to a medium and had some guidance.
Sally definitely. And I feel like
I think Elsie would have come through. Elsie would have come through and said, "Girl, get it together."
Right? Could you imagine the medium being like, "Did you guys share 2 sordid rooms in Chelsea?" Like, they use that exact wording, and they're like, "We did." Some queen casket. Queen, was she laid out like a queen? They're like, that's it. I may start my own YouTube channel where I now channel, like we acted out, where I'm channeling Broadway characters. I bring them through. Thank you. That's going to be my retirement. So, and then final question, hundreds of years from now, when we're no longer here, how would you each individually want you to be looked back and remembered?
Oh God, that's so hard. I mean, I think I would like to be remembered as somebody who contributed to the arts in a positive way, and also taught their child how to be better than them.
That's a big one.
I love that. I just want to I just want people to hopefully remember how that there was joy and that there was inspiration.
I'm going to be driving home with so much on my brain. You guys have given me so much to think about. So I want to thank you both so much for being my guests, today. And I will put up all the good links where people can learn more about you, either as individually as artists, as the Broadway Husbands, where they can find some of your merchandise. some of the all the good things that are coming your way. So everyone at home, Stephen and Bret, be well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.